Hi, everybody. Good morning.
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 Welcome. I'm hearing somebody's background. Children?
No, hang on. That could be. Is that me? Can you hear me?
Could be, yeah.
Oh, I thought I was on mute. Hang on. I screwed up. I'm just in my whistle place. Just give me a sec, guys. Sorry. Guys, shh. 1 second.
Okay. Just like to call the meeting to order, 9:02. And I'd like to acknowledge that the Metro Vancouver Transit Police operate through the traditional territories of the Lower Mainland Coast Salish people, and we give thanks for their hospitality on these lands. Okay. So we'll start with a regular board agenda, and we'll start with the consent agenda, item 1.1. Does anybody have anything that they would like to pull out of the consent agenda? No, hearing nothing. Can I have a resolution?
I'll move the resolution.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Marnie. Okay. Do we have any public delegations today? No,
We do not.
thank you. And the TPPA?
They're not
Nope.
on.
Not on. Okay, so can we move to item 3.2, the Chief Officer report?
So thanks. In particular, a couple things. One is, some of you may have noted that earlier this month, we were able to do our Police Exemplary Service Medal Awards. And I just wanted to make note of that combined, we were handing out recognition for well over or just under 200 years worth of policing work to members who had been in the job. One of them has been here actually a total of 4 decades, I believe, in total, not here, but in a variety of other, with another agency in here. So it's always good to recognize the work done by individuals who have spent a significant part of their lives giving back to the community. The other thing clearly to talk about is the COVID updates and the changes that we're experiencing here. One of them is, for a while ago, and we may have earlier reported, we've already had a mandatory mask policy within our area of the building, the police building. So those outside of their office or in a going into a room with another person was required that you wear a mask. And of course, we had the usual protocols of self-screening coming in, answering questionnaires and temperature checks. Those had been in place since almost the very beginning, in particular our communication center. One of the, and so a lot of it was a reminder and stepped up. It was stepped up with more signage. It was a reminder to become more vigilant in terms of looking at self-screening individuals coming into work. And so far, we haven't had anyone contract COVID-19 where we can trace it to the job. We've had a civilian staff member appear off the job where they may have, through contact tracing, been exposed. That leads us to that I think agencies are maturing quite a bit in terms of an exposure. I think when initially we learned of COVID, there was a lot of concern when somebody, even if we arrested somebody or dealt with someone in the public who may have had COVID-19, there was a lot of significant concern as to the ability to contract it and do it, and contract it and face risk. Since then, we have been in contact with individuals who have had COVID-19. Our members, though, having followed the proper protocols of wearing their own personal protective equipment, minimizing the time they're with the individual. This includes, by the way, that we place a mask on individuals. Like, not for, we tell them we're going to do it, but we do, after we arrest someone, put a mask on them to, if they're going to stay in our custody or be transported. So we haven't had any confirmed cases of it. But the reality of it is that with the exposure rate going up throughout the province and this contact tracing, that people are finding out that they have been near or possibly near someone who had COVID-19 in a while. So Just as we were starting the meeting, a phone call, my phone rang. My son had received a call that he had been, but it's traced back to November 1st, and I haven't. We haven't been in. We've been in contact, but not close contact at all since then. But it's very well spread, and I think Dr. Bonnie Henry says that they're actually falling behind in this contact tracing. So we're continuing to monitor that. Our own personal protective equipment is good. That we've got a good supply of it. We have a good supply of hand wash, and that our cleaning services, including our own internal and ones such as Trauma Scene that does our vehicles and that, are able to keep up with our demands and requirements for what we're doing in within respect of it. Operations has, from a civilian staffing point of view, as much staff as possible is working from home. And even if it's full-time from home, or if it's a couple days a week, or only having to come in 1 day a week, or once every 2 weeks, or whatever it is, we are really mandating that, and at this point in time during the next couple week period, to ensure it. But with that always goes a follow-up that a lot of exposure is happening in public settings or personal private settings, as I said, like family gatherings, ceremonies, and that. So we're asking our staff to be vigilant while they're away from work because of the risks that come into play. From an operational point of view, our staffing levels are good. We have been able to put out, still meeting our staffing requirements. There hasn't been an influx. Deputy Chief Cumberworth and his team do have an alternate shifting pattern prepared that we could implement in very short order if we needed to, as a fallback to it. But right now, even in areas of investigations where members can conduct work from home or from a remote workplace, we're encouraging that. So it'll be places like Professional Standards, some of our general investigative units that are doing follow-up or reports or disclosure can do it remotely through connecting into the organization. That is being heavily emphasized. And I think, as you can tell by just about everybody here, although she does come into the office 4 days a week, she's off Fridays, Anita and Taryn and Stephen and Mike and them, like, if we can do work away from the workplace, we're doing that as well too. So I'll kind of stop there on the whole COVID and see if there's any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Chief. Does anybody have any questions? Sorry, I had the screen on. Does anybody raise their hand?
No.
Okay. All right. Did you have anything else you wanted to report, Chief?
No, just that there has been some really good work. I just put it here going on, and I'm going to use last night's operations as an example. I think, again, there were like 2 or 3 people saved in medical distress through naloxone. These included, some vulnerable groups. There were, for our agency, again, with our size, there were numerous Mental Health Act responses that we were dealt with last night. And those shifts have been busy with that type of an opportunity, of engaging in and around the systems as the weather's changed and COVID's there. Sometimes we're dealing with that vulnerable sector who's in and around the major transportation hubs. And as you sometimes hear, that there will be, drugs that hit the streets that have a higher potency. We're certainly experiencing that, and we're well past, we're into the highest number of naloxone cases and overdose saves this year than any of the last 3 years. We've exceeded that, and my bet is we will exceed it by greater than 50% this year of our average. So well done by the members, and Constable Poncion, who leads that on our behalf, of looking at that and keeping our supply of naloxone on hand, and to the members who identify the at-risk areas where they're getting out and about around the system, and being in the right place at the right time.
Thank
Sure.
you. Murray.
How is the member doing that was hurt the other night?
So thanks, Murray. So the member who was hurt the other night had a broken hip and a fractured pelvis in terms of it. So he's at home now. He seems to be doing well, but it will be an easy 6 months before he's even getting into good rehab, and probably a year before we'll see the member again. Just on it. And so thanks, the Surrey RCMP have the matter. The accident occurred in Surrey. The member was responding. Two other members were checking an individual at Surrey Central SkyTrain when they discovered that the person was wanted on a Canada-wide warrant for his arrest. And when they went to arrest, the fight was on with the individual, and some others tried to interfere, appears as well. The person got away briefly. There was another altercation where they chased him. There was a physical, I'll use the word, there was a violent physical altercation between them trying to get away using force. There was a call for cover. This member who was attending was attending to come for cover when a vehicle pulled out from a stop sign, and they clipped each other, and he went off the road into some bushes through a fence. Some very good work by some Samaritans, because the member, of course, had a broken hip, was in the car, and the car caught on fire. So they actually pulled him from the vehicle. So in terms of it. So, and then of course, the individual who was fleeing from the members on the Canada-wide warrant had a loaded firearm on him and a replica firearm at the same time. So at the end of the day, the injuries, well, I would describe as being serious, or not life-threatening in terms of it. The other lady, I came in, we checked, we've talked, spoke with her as well to make sure that, you know, it's an accident and that, and you know, that nobody was seriously harmed other than the member, if you want to call it, with these fractures and that. So, so just so you're aware what happens when there's a police car accident like that, the local jurisdictional police, the Surrey RCMP, take responsibility are conducting that, and we're dealing with the individual who, you know, with the Canada-wide warrant and the firearms, et cetera, at that point in time.
So that person's in custody, are they?
No, I'll ask Mike. I don't think we've caught him. He got away on foot. We got the firearms, so.
Yeah, he's still outstanding. Our general investigation unit took over the investigation for the loaded firearm itself, and are trying to track the individual down. He's of no fixed address, so it's just a matter of time.
Right, well, thank you. I'm glad that the member is recovering at least. That's good to hear. Unfortunate to have that serious injury though.
Yeah, so he had just recently arrived. He was from the RCMP, so we'll be calling up the RCMP and asking for a replacement. So.
Well, thank you, Chief. And commendations to everybody who worked on that. My goodness.
Yeah.
That's a difficult evening for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other comments? Okay. All right, I guess we're going to item 4. And 4.1 is the strategic plan update. Stephen?
Okay, yeah, I'm going to try to share my screen here. I just got a couple slides. Hopefully everyone can see this. So we have our existing strategic plan. Everyone's aware that it's coming to a close at the end of this year. When you look at that strategic plan, we have our commitment statement, demonstrate excellence in public transit policing. The board has met on a couple of occasions, both in October and November, to discuss updating that commitment statement with an expanded purpose statement. And we're now looking ahead to December and January and moving into more of the strategic goals. So our existing plan has 3 strategic goals. It has 7 strategic objectives and has 14 key performance indicators. When I go into the process map, looking ahead to next year, so we have an upcoming session in December, and then we're looking to plan an additional session in January to work on updating the strategic goals or strategic pillars. There's going to be 3 or 4 of those, so a lot of work's going to go into those. Then when we look towards February and March, it would be moving into the leadership team to draft strategic objectives and then bring those back for the board's discussion and approval. So looking at the dates that we've set in our calendar for the board, we'd be looking at bringing those updated objectives back to the board on April 23rd, getting feedback from the board, then coming back with basically the first draft of the strategic plan at the June meeting. And that gives us a really good opportunity to get feedback on the full plan from the board, and then go out and get a really a more expansive set of stakeholder feedback on what we've developed over the summer. The board obviously doesn't meet over the summer, and so it gives our staff a chance to go back out to JPT partners, the TransLink enterprise, and make sure that we're hitting the mark. And then looking ahead to the kind of the fall of next year, we've got a second draft of the board in September, and then hopefully the third and kind of final draft in November. That does take up the the duration of next year. So we're likely not looking at a new strategic plan until kind of Q1 2022. As we've said all along, we're going to push forward on this as quickly as we possibly can. And so if we do have a strategic plan ready to release and publish earlier than that, if we do move through this process at a quicker pace, then we can obviously release that earlier. But realistically, looking ahead to next year and knowing that the pandemic is going to continue to impact operations to a certain extent, and we're going to continue to meet virtually, at least in Q1 of next year, I think this is a pretty realistic timeline for development. So I think what I would put forward to the board, and we've discussed this previously, has been to look at extending our existing strategic plan for 2021, so we continue to report on our existing strategic goals and strategic objectives while we work through this process of developing a new one, which would mean the new strategic plan would likely be 2022 to 2025.
Any comments, anybody?
Do we need to pass a resolution to extend the current strategic plan pending the completion of the next one?
I think we should. I think we should do that today, and then that allows us to put that forward to the province and police services and apprise them about our current situation and what the timeline is for putting forward a new strat plan.
So is that, is there anything else that needs to be done other than just a resolution to extend the time frame of the current plan by sufficient time to complete the new plan? Is that the context of the resolution?
Exactly. That would be sufficient. So the resolution would be to extend the strategic plan for one more year. Till the end of.
I'll move that.
I would just tweak that a little bit, and we'll extend the strategic plan for at least one more year, and then revisit it as we get closer to the end of 2021 in case we need to extend it even further. Hopefully we won't, because we're making good solid progress now and we have a good schedule. Okay, so to extend the strategic plan for at least 1 year.
Yeah, so move.
Thank you. And can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Taryn. So that's all in favor. Okay. Is there anything else? Anybody else? Any other questions about that process? Great. Thank you. So we can move on to item 4.2, diversity initiatives.
So this is a standing item, and I think I reported on this last time as well, is that so we're engaged both internally with our own diversity initiatives, or looking at what initiatives we can take on in the diversity. And of course, TransLink itself has an equity, diversity, and inclusion group that is looking at throughout the whole of all the they call it subsidiaries, which we can take advantage of to be a part of. So one of the things coming up is both or myself and CJ Kyle and Cheryl Simpkin will be part of a discussion group on the diversity, the issues in policing with the whole defundment movement, changes in what's occurring in our communities and what we're seeing. Cheryl Simpkin also from the Indigenous perspective, and CJ Kyle as well, who will be speaking and answering questions from a policing perspective and looking at that. Of course, we're continuing to always review our own, I will say, right, starting from how we recruit, who we recruit, how we go out. Some talks with recruiting has always been that, you're not an applicant processing unit, you're actually a recruiting unit, like, to look for who we're looking to hire, the type of individuals, the backgrounds, the everything, education and all that, and to reach out and find ways into that. Having said that, we have a very diverse in certain ways, such as Constable Hanif. We just met with I met again with the Muslim communities here, and we're starting to extend our outreach into them through our NPOs, and then looking at ways of getting more involved into them and outreach into them, including some of our initiatives, whether it be in recruiting. And we tend to focus a lot on the police officer, which is important, but that also goes into our civilian staffing as well too. I think we have to be conscious of it's not just policing where we're looking at it, that it's across the board. I'm also, happy that when it comes to things such as promotion and individuals, moving up in the organization, that it's not about just appointing or asking somebody. That last year, there were a couple of individuals, couple of female members who were kind of almost holding back or expressing an interest in promotion. We spent a year, not spent directly, but we put them in positions of opportunity within operations, Mike's group, acting positions, gave them the experience and all that. And very happy to say that 40% of our sergeant's promotions this year were female candidates, right, who had applied into it. And when I say that, I say it because it's done, it was all deserving in terms of it. The individuals, whether we look at mentoring programs or we look at giving people opportunity to experience what it would be like when we see that they have a skill set in terms of it, was, I would say, was successful over the past year. And of course, we're looking at, even as we talk about succession planning and other opportunities, opening ourselves up into mentoring roles, and both internally as we look to create mentoring positions with some senior people who have experience as NCOs and are good at people skills and helping people into these positions. And we're working with the union on that, which will feed into the equity, diversity in that, and opening ourselves to externally, such as having Superintendent Ferlin join us for a period of time. And that's been working out really good because we are beyond shadowing. We're actually just assigning her work now and getting some time, being able to keep her busy throughout the day, right? So, which is working really well, and do and not because he's here. I think a lot of this opened our eyes to the value of mentoring when I had the opportunity through Chief Palmer's initiatives at the CACP to create a mentoring program for senior leaders. Really, and you saw we could see the response being at the CACP of people who want that type of interaction. It's one thing to be encouraged, it's one thing to find somebody, but to really get that experience of being able to spend time one-on-one with individuals, I think leads to people developing their own style and skills, and but also giving them the confidence that, hate to say it, that senior police leaders and that are just people who fell into their positions more or less, right, because of what they brought at some given time. So I know this is a standing item, and we'll keep any direct initiatives coming to you, but it is something that we need to weave into the fabric of what we do and how we do it each day. So,
Thank you, Chief.
Chief, Ali here. I tried to find it here on my phone, but I couldn't find the article. There was something this morning. I read it. I don't know if I read it in the middle of the night, that a certain police force is mandated 40% of their group have to be minority groups. I could be mistaken. Have you heard about that?
No.
Or do I need to?
If you find it, if you could send it. There are some organizations we've heard of that are, people are getting, I would say whether they're mandates or targets of what they're doing, like the Toronto Police Service or Toronto Police Department recently had a recruitment class, if I get it right, was 50% female, was the first time they had ever had that. We're seeing things, and people are tracking it in terms of not just gender, but also the diversity that we bring into it. The transit police, if I get it right, we're 31 or 32% diverse as it is now. I think we've actually made, and kudos to the recruiting section, and relying on people. I mean, word of mouth is a big thing with when you have good officers and who represent and come from have a diverse background, is speaking to them and asking them about who they might have in mind as well too. And so there are some diverse cultures that I think we do very well in getting representation from here. So, but yeah, I haven't read where if it's been mandated or targeted. So,
George?
Okay, thank you.
Just the attending the Canadian Association of Police Governance conference, and I know that's an item a little bit later that there's a couple of points I'd like to speak to, but apropos of what the chief was just saying, that obviously was a key aspect throughout the entire conference around recruitment, but also at the governance level by the boards. The chief talking about operational aspects, but there are things I think we as a board can discuss going forward in the next several months of best practices, maybe take some things out of some other organizations. Ottawa was clearly a place that is doing some interesting things from a board perspective that maybe I'd like to talk about along the way as well.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for giving us those updates in the emails that you sent. That was very helpful too. It's nice to have that in writing. Does anybody else have any other comments? Okay. Well, thank you, Chief. I'm glad we're keeping that as an agenda item, and yeah, it's good. Okay. We have a report from the Chair of Finance.
Good morning. For the open portion of our meeting, we just had a regular meeting just discussing our next set of meetings, and we had the report. There's nothing significant to report. I'll defer to the in-camera portion.
Okay. And from the Chair of Governance, we're going to talk a bit more about the chairs in the in-camera portion. The last meetings have been busy. We've made a lot of progress. I've got some notes here. First, we have a lot of progress on the Indigenous files that we're working on. We had that excellent event seems like about 3 weeks ago. It was terrific, really, really good. And we've been doing some really good training for staff, and we've now developed training for the board. And I think we're set up for January for that training session. I'm very pleased about that. We've got our strategic planning process in place and moving ahead. And so that's good. And our committees are now set up pending some decisions later on this morning. George is going to report on the conferences that he went to. And I think, Carla, are you able to give us looking at this little squares, a little report on the conference you went to as well? I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you can. I attended a good meeting on the planning for TransLink a week or two ago that was pretty informative and really interesting, which we'll talk a bit more in camera. I will say about that meeting that, it was really informative, really gratifying to see the level of work that is done by the people at TransLink. The staff there was absolutely excellent. It was incredibly thoughtful, very careful, and it gave me a lot of confidence in the staff up and down that organization. And I would hope that other people who were in attendance were equally impressed. It was really, really excellent. So that's all I have for now. And there's a few more things I'd like to talk about in camera. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Oh, it's not in camera. It's the next item, committee membership. We've got that circulated, the committee membership list. And can I have a recommendation, unless anybody has any questions about the list of committee members for this year? Okay, can I have a motion for that? Somebody? Can I have an approval? Sorry. Thank you, Sean. Anybody second?
Second.
Thank you. Do I need to read it? The reappointment of Marnie Larson as Chair of the Human Resources and Compensation Committee, and that Directors Hotel Palmer and Parmar are reappointed for 2021. The appointment of George Madden as Chair of the Governance Committee. Thank you, George. And that Directors Dinwiddie, Hotel, and Thatcher are reappointed for 2021. And the reappointment of Ali Pechman as Chair of the Finance Committee, and Directors Dinwiddie and Madden are reappointed for 2021. Great, thank you, everybody. Item 6, Canadian Association of Police Governance Virtual Conference and AGM. I did not make it to that conference, but I know that George did, and I think Carly, you did as well. And would you like to tell us a little bit about it, George? I know you wrote some emails. Sure. And you said you had a few things you'd like to talk about.
Well, just in the interest of time, you're right. I sent out those point form reports just to try to give a bit of a flavor. I think the big challenge was the conference was being done obviously virtually, just the same way as we're trying to do some of these things. And it's got its shares of glitches and technical issues and so on, but the organizers did a good job of trying to deal with that. We know it's tough, especially when you're dealing across the country with different time zones and so on. I know that Tara, board secretary, has the link to some of the video, so that's available to any board members who are interested seeing any of the speakers. I think you can send that out to them if they have any interest. I'd say the virtual meeting piece is something that I guess we're going to have to get used to. The conference next year is in Ottawa. This particular year, it was a prioritizing wellness through governance program, but it was pretty broad. One of the more impressive discussions, I think, was from Chief Peter Slowly of Ottawa PD. He's formerly with a deputy with Toronto. Very strong presenter, as noted in some of the notes. And Ottawa has created a Community Equity Council and Advisory Group that was a proactive initiative by the Ottawa Police Board. Again, something I think for discussion probably down the road around here in Metro Vancouver and with the transit police. There were comments related to a perceived public divide, especially around the two fastest growing communities, the Indigenous and racialized populations, and how a culture of respect, humility, and honesty starts inside the police services. And I know that's the case led by our chief. The Monday conference featured a really good discussion around mental health and addiction issues. There was actually a presentation with the U.S. Police Department San Antonio, an HBO film that I mentioned that you can get a link to. But also Chief Palmer can maybe speak also to Sergeant AJ Benefield of the Vancouver Police Department. She was part of the panel discussions related to CAR 87, which has come up, I believe, in conversations here at the board in the past, talking a little bit about it. But I didn't realize it was originally established back in 1978. So a real long time it's been around. And very impressive with Sergeant Benefield. Might again be invited to something that we're doing along the way, just to have a discussion in local terms. And finally, so you're aware, there's a fellow by the name of Sandy Smallwood that some of you maybe had met, who used to be the chair of the Ottawa Police Board and is still on the board and so on. He was one of the better presenters. I'm actually just going to have a telephone conversation with him on Monday. He had a wide-ranging discussion around governance, measuring results within the policing framework, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Plus Ottawa, and this kind of goes to what was just discussed, as a significant success in creating policies through the board to increase community representation in the police services through some specific recruiting initiatives. So there were some things out of that I think generally were very positive, and everybody seems to be working on the same page across Canada right now. I think we can all learn little bits and pieces. I've always been a big believer in conferences that if there's one or two good takeaway pieces that can be applied, it's worth attending. Obviously, in a case like this where you're not attending in person, you don't have the side discussions around a coffee table or after a meeting and so on. So it makes it a bit more difficult. That's why I reached out to Sandy Smallwood in Ottawa, because I'd just like to know a little more about what they're doing, and I'll report back to you as well.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you. Carla? Are you
Yeah.
able to report
Yeah, really.
on that conference or on the webinar?
On the other one, yeah, just really briefly. I mean, I only made it to one of the sessions on Monday. My Friday filled up, so I didn't really get a chance to go. But I really appreciated your notes, George. I think I learned more from your notes than from attending myself. So I appreciated the summaries and the detail that you put into it. It was very helpful. And I did agree. I did go to the diversity presentation on Monday, and the speaker that you're going to meet with now. I think that's be an interesting conversation. So I'd like to hear more about what you find. I did go to a session that was put on Tuesday on just police governance, and it was very quickly it was thorough but quite general in terms of police governance. To talk about history and governance models and compared civilian oversight and police governance to corporate models. So I have slides, and there's a tape of the session if anyone's interested. It's put on by a litigator from Ontario. So the focus was on Ontario legislation, so not directly applicable, but comparable to BC. Some interesting scenarios presented, but a good general overview of police governance models. So.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of the open portion of the meeting. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for February 5th at 9 a.m. Anybody have any other comments for this portion of the meeting? Okay, so we'll close it. Thank you.